My name is Margaret Calloway. I am 68 years old, and on a Tuesday morning in April, my stepson cut the brake lines on my car and watched me drive into the Great Smoky Mountains. Route 441 at dawn sits inside a cloud. Fog wrapped the road like wet cotton, and the headlights only pushed 10 feet into it. I smelled something metallic, something chemical, but I blamed the heater. I should not have blamed the heater. The curve came at mile marker 7. I pressed the brake pedal. It went to the floor, no resistance, no friction. Just my foot touching metal and the road tilting downward. I tried the parking brake. Nothing. The smell hit me full then. Brake fluid. Sharp, bitter, like burnt almonds mixed with paint thinner. That smell meant the lines were empty. That smell meant someone had drained them. The guardrail split like foil. The car dropped 15 feet down the embankment and slammed sideways into a red oak. The airbag punched my chest. Glass sprayed across my lap. My third and fourth ribs on the left side broke. I catalog these facts the way I catalog everything. It is what I do. I count. Through the shattered windshield up on the road, I saw a silver pickup truck, Curtis Walsh's truck. My stepson stood at the edge of the embankment, hands in his jacket pockets, head tilted slightly to the left, watching. He did not call for help. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories. This is where women tell the stories that kept them up at night, the ones that changed everything. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Curtis climbed down the slope. Slow. Deliberate. He stopped 10 feet from the car and stood among the dead leaves, studying me the way a man studies a deer he shot from a distance, waiting to see if it would get up. I heard footsteps from the other side, different rhythm, careful, not casual. A voice came through the shattered passenger window, low, barely a breath. Play dead, he's still watching. I closed my eyes. I stopped my chest from moving. I counted heartbeats instead of breaths. 1, 2, 3. Curtis stood there for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I counted every one. He did not call 911. He did not say my name. He did not scramble down the slope the way a man does when his stepmother's car goes off a cliff. He waited, patient, still, like he had done this before. Then I heard gravel shift, an engine starting, tires rolling over loose stone. He drove away. I opened my eyes. A man's face filled the broken passenger window. Gray stubble, trucker cap, calm brown eyes. He was already pressing a cloth against the cut above my ear. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "my name is Dale Hensley." He pressed the cloth harder. "I know who you are, and I know what he just did." "How?" I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. "Your husband hired me." Dale's hand was steady against my wound. 14 months ago, before he died. Blood ran down my neck. Fog closed around the wreck, and the man who saved my life told me my dead husband had sent him. I should explain who I am, not who I was on that road, bleeding and broken, who I was before any of this. Margaret Calloway, orphan at 16. My father drank. My mother left. One morning I woke up and both were gone, in their own ways, and I had $42 and a library card. I learned to count because counting was the only thing nobody could take from me. I put myself through college, worked nights at a copy shop, earned a degree in accounting, then a certification in forensic analysis. 30 years I spent in rooms full of liars, reading the numbers they thought would hide them. I dismantled 3 Ponzi schemes. I traced $14 million through shell companies in 4 countries. The numbers never lied. The people always did. I met Richard Calloway at a charity auction in Knoxville. He was 70 then, retired from the timber industry with hands like old rope and a voice that made you lean in. He asked me what I liked besides work. Nobody had ever asked me that. "Quiet," I told him. He smiled. "Me too." We married 2 years later. 8 years of mornings on the porch with coffee, evenings with books by the fire, weekends at his cabin in the Smokies. Richard was the first safe thing I had ever known. A lighthouse after decades of open water. But the lighthouse went dark 6 months before that morning on Route 441. Richard died of a heart condition that had been stalking him for years, and the darkness moved closer every day after. I did not know, on the day I buried Richard, that the most dangerous thing in my life was standing beside me at the grave, reading a eulogy he had practiced in the mirror. Curtis Walsh was Richard's son from his first marriage, 38 years old, real estate developer, which meant he bought things with his father's money and sold them at a loss. He shook my hand when we first met like I was selling him insurance. Denise Walsh Pruitt was the older one, 41. Homemaker, church volunteer, the kind of woman who brought casseroles to funerals and kept score of who did not. She smiled at me that first dinner and said, "Our mother loved this house," marking territory with a dead woman's name. I understood. I was the intruder, the second wife, the woman who showed up after Patricia Calloway died of cancer and somehow earned a ring that Denise believed should have stayed in a drawer. Richard knew his children. He loved them the way you love a river that keeps flooding, from a distance with sandbags ready. When he drew up the prenuptial agreement, giving me protection and naming me executor of his estate, Curtis sat at the dinner table and smiled. "Of course, Dad." He twisted the wedding band on his right hand. I noticed it that night but did not ask. Later, I learned it was Amber's ring, his dead first wife's ring. He wore it like a medal. Denise whispered to Curtis by the front door as they left that Christmas dinner. I was clearing plates. I should not have heard, but forensic accountants develop a habit of listening to things that are not meant for them. "She won't be here forever," Denise said. I set down the plates. I counted the silverware. 8 forks, 8 knives. I did not count the warning. I should have. Richard died on a Wednesday. Heart gave out in the garden, between the azaleas and the porch steps, at 3:47 in the afternoon. I found him on his back, eyes open, one hand reaching toward the house, toward me. At the hospital, they told me what I already knew. He was gone. I sat with him for 1 hour. I held his hand until the warmth left it. His pocket watch had stopped. The crystal was intact, the hands frozen at 3:47, the exact minute. I kept that watch. I carry it still. At the funeral, Curtis delivered the eulogy. It was flawless. Pauses in the right places. Voice cracking on cue. He spoke about his father's strength, his father's generosity, his father's love. Every word polished like a courtroom argument. Denise cried. She cried for exactly 17 seconds, stopped, spoke her line about heaven, then cried again. I had seen that pattern before, in conference rooms, from CFOs who knew the auditor was close. I did not cry. I stood at the back and counted. 86 people attended, 41 sent flowers, 9 mentioned Richard's first wife. Curtis smiled 11 times. After the reception, when the house was empty and the leftover casseroles filled the refrigerator, I sat in Richard's study and opened his desk. In the back of the bottom drawer, behind old tax returns and a box of fishing flies, I found an envelope, sealed, white, my name in Richard's handwriting. "For Maggie, open only when needed." I turned it over. I held it up to the light. I put it back in the drawer. I was not ready. I did not think I needed it. Richard knew better. 6 months after Richard's funeral, Curtis began his campaign. It started with a request. He sat on my porch, iced tea in hand, his voice smooth and reasonable. "Maggie, the executor role is a burden. You're grieving. Let me handle the estate." "No," I said. "Richard asked me to do this." He twisted Amber's ring, smiled. "Of course." Denise worked the other front. Within 3 weeks, the women at First Baptist stopped sitting next to me. Whispers traveled the way they do in small Tennessee towns. Through casserole dishes and prayer chains, Maggie Calloway manipulated a dying man. Maggie Calloway changed the will. Maggie Calloway was not family. I heard it at the grocery store. I heard it at the post office. I stopped going to church. Then Curtis came to visit again. He said he wanted to check on me, but I noticed his eyes moving toward the garage. He walked through the house slowly, pausing at doors, looking at windows, measuring something. A man came with him. Troy Beckham, 36, a mechanic from Gatlinburg. Curtis introduced him as, "My buddy Troy, just saying hello." Troy shook my hand. His palm was slick with engine grease, black crescents under every fingernail. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," Troy said. I offered them both iced tea. They stayed 40 minutes. Curtis talked about the weather, the estate, the price of lumber. Troy said almost nothing. When they left, Curtis touched my shoulder in the doorway. "Take care, Maggie." That night, I walked into the garage to check the lock. The air smelled different. Something chemical, something sharp, brake fluid. I did not recognize it then. I thought maybe Curtis had leaned against the car. I went to bed. I should not have gone to bed. The morning of April 7th, I drove to Richard's cabin in the Smokies. I went there when I needed to think, and I had been needing to think for weeks. Dawn fog covered the mountains, thick, white, the kind that erases the tree line and makes the road float. Smoky Mountain fog smells like wet wood and old earth, and I breathed it in the way you breathe something that reminds you of a person you have lost. Richard loved that fog. He said it made the mountains honest, stripped them down to shape and shadow. I had Richard's pocket watch in my coat pocket, still stopped at 3:47. I touched it the way I touch a talisman, rubbing the case with my thumb, and I thought about the envelope in the desk drawer. I had not opened it. 6 months, and I had not opened it. I told myself I did not need whatever was inside. I told myself Richard was being cautious, overly careful, the way old men sometimes get near the end. On the road, somewhere past Gatlinburg, I noticed the car felt loose. The steering had a slight drift. The brakes caught a half-second late. Small things, the kind of things you ignore when you are 68 and used to ignoring small warnings because the big ones never came. In the rearview mirror, a truck followed at a distance. Large, dark green. 18-wheeler cab without a trailer. It had been behind me since the parkway entrance, always 3 or 4 curves back, never closing the gap. I registered it the way I register anomalies in a spreadsheet. Noted, filed, not yet significant. I drove on, into the fog, toward the curve at mile marker 7, toward the end of everything I thought I knew. Newfound Gap Road bends hard at the 7-mile mark. The guardrail is old steel. Beyond it, the mountain drops. I pressed the brake pedal at the top of the curve. It sank to the floorboard like stepping into water. No catch, no pressure. Nothing between me and gravity. My mind did not scream. 30 years of forensic accounting teaches you to observe when others panic. I cataloged: brake pedal unresponsive, parking brake lever loose, chemical smell increasing, brake lines severed, not worn, severed. There is a difference a mechanic would know. The car struck the guardrail at 32 miles per hour. The rail bent and separated. For a breath, I was airborne, weightless, and Richard's pocket watch lifted from my coat pocket and floated beside my face like a small brass planet. Then the oak tree. The impact compressed the driver's side door into my left hip. The airbag fired. Glass from the windshield covered my hands like frost. The pocket watch struck the dashboard and fell between the seats. I heard its crystal crack. When I found it later, the hands had stopped again. 7:23 a.m., the minute the car hit the tree. I was pinned. Ribs 3 and 4, left side fractured, laceration above the right ear, right wrist sprained from gripping the wheel. I cataloged each injury the way I would catalog entries in a ledger, clean, precise. Remove the emotion, and the facts remain. I looked up through the broken windshield at the road above. Curtis stood at the edge. He sat down on the guardrail. He took out his phone. He crossed one leg over the other. He waited for me to die the way you wait for a pot to boil, patiently, without urgency, like he had done it before. After Curtis drove away, Dale Hensley climbed down the embankment with the sure footing of a man who had trained for exactly this. He moved through the underbrush without hurrying. He called 911 on a satellite phone. He pressed gauze to my head wound. He checked my pulse with 2 fingers on my wrist, counting silently. "You are going to be fine," he said. "Who are you?" My voice came from far away. "Private investigator, licensed in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia." He said this the way a plumber says he is a plumber. No drama, just credentials. I have been following Curtis Walsh for 14 months. Following him. Why? Dale paused. He looked at me with eyes that had been carrying a weight for a long time. Someone who loved you very much hired me to keep you safe. He looked toward the road. I was not fast enough this morning. He did not say Richard's name, not yet. He let the fact settle. The helicopter came 20 minutes later. The paramedics strapped me to a board and checked my pupils and asked me questions I answered in the flat, precise tone of a woman who was already counting the hours until she could sit up and begin. Before they lifted me into the helicopter, Dale pressed something into my palm. A USB drive, small, black, warm from his pocket. "Your husband left this with me," he said. "Watch it when you are strong enough." He held my gaze. "Do not tell anyone you survived." Not yet. The helicopter lifted. The Smokies fell away below me, fog curling between the ridges. I held the USB drive so tightly, my sprained wrist screamed. Dale Hensley had told me two things. Play dead, and my husband had sent him. Both saved my life. Sevier County Medical Center, room 412. The fluorescent lights buzzed at 60 cycles per second. I counted them because the ceiling was the only thing I could see without pain. 3 fractured ribs, mild concussion, torn rotator cuff in the right shoulder. The doctor said I was lucky. I told her I was a forensic accountant, and luck had nothing to do with the structural integrity of a red oak tree. Curtis called the hospital that afternoon. His voice carried the exact weight of concern a man practices before dialing. "Stepmom, I just heard. How are you? What happened?" He called me stepmom 3 times in that conversation. He had never used the word before. I counted. "I lost my brakes," I said. "Just road wear, I think. I'm fine." "Thank God," Curtis exhaled, practiced. "I'll come visit soon." He did not come. Denise sent flowers, white lilies with a card. "Praying for you, sis." I noted the flowers. I noted the absence. Denise did not visit either. I lay in the hospital bed that night, alone, holding Richard's pocket watch. The cracked crystal caught the hallway light. 7:23. The minute my car hit the oak. The minute Richard almost lost me, though he had already been gone 6 months. "I'm still here," I told the watch. Sheriff Ray Boone came the next morning. Broad-shouldered, careful with his words, a Sevier County man through and through. He took my statement. I told him the brakes failed. I did not mention Curtis. I did not mention Dale. Not yet. As he reached the door, Boone turned back. He lowered his voice. "Mrs. Calloway, your brake lines were cut clean through. That is not wear and tear." He let the door close softly behind him. I watched the USB that night on a borrowed laptop propped against the hospital pillows, the volume turned low. Richard's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his study. The desk lamp lit the left side of his face. He looked tired. He looked frightened. Richard Calloway, who had built a timber empire and faced down union strikes and market crashes, looked like a man sitting in a house full of smoke and unable to find the fire. "Maggie," he said, "if you are watching this, then the thing I was afraid of has happened." He told me all of it. After Amber died, Richard had noticed inconsistencies in the life insurance paperwork. Amber Walsh, 29, early childhood teacher, had a $500,000 policy. Curtis was the sole beneficiary. The policy had been taken out 8 months before Amber's death. Curtis had made the payments. Richard did not go to the police. He had no evidence. He had a feeling, and feelings do not hold up in court. So he hired Dale Hensley, a private investigator and former state trooper, to watch Curtis, to gather what Richard could not. "I am not certain," Richard said on the screen. His hands shook slightly. "I am not 100% certain, but I am afraid enough to protect you." Then Richard did something I had never seen in 8 years of marriage. He cried, quietly, the way a man cries when he has carried something too heavy for too long and the floor is finally giving way. "Find Dale," he said. "He has everything." I pressed my palm against the screen, against the cold glass where his face was. "Why didn't you tell me, Richard?" The room was silent. The fluorescent lights hummed at 60 cycles per second. I counted them again. But this time, the counting did not help. Dale came to the hospital the next evening. He avoided the front entrance, used the service stairs, and arrived at my room carrying a canvas bag and his thermos of black coffee. He moved like a man who had spent 20 years as a state trooper, and 12 more watching people who did not want to be watched. He opened the bag. Inside was a file 2 inches thick. 14 months, Dale said. He spread the contents across my bed. Photographs, receipts, a timeline drawn in red ink on graph paper, phone records, bank statements. This is everything. I looked at the timeline first. Amber Walsh died 5 years ago on the Appalachian Trail. She fell from a cliff on a section called Charlie's Bunion. Curtis was the only person with her. He reported it as an accident. He told the rangers she slipped. Dale's investigation showed that Troy Beckham had purchased new climbing rope 1 week before that hike, but Amber used old rope on the trail. Rope Curtis packed. Rope that showed artificial wear patterns when Dale later obtained it from evidence storage. The dash cam footage was next. Dale's truck had a forward-facing camera. The footage from the night before my crash showed 2 figures entering my garage at 2:14 a.m. Curtis Walsh and Troy Beckham. Timestamp. Clear faces. 37 minutes inside. If you are following this story, hit subscribe, because what comes next is worse. Dale placed one more photograph on the bed. Curtis Walsh, standing on the cliff where Amber fell. 1 week after her funeral. Smiling. Hands in his pockets. The same posture I had seen through my broken windshield. Killers returned to the scene. I had read that in criminal psychology textbooks. I never expected to prove it with a photograph. I asked Dale to bring me Curtis's financial records, public filings, property transactions, anything traceable. Dale raised an eyebrow. I am a forensic accountant, I said. Let me do what I am good at. The numbers told the story the way numbers always do, clearly, without sentiment. After Amber's death, Curtis collected $500,000 from her life insurance. Within 6 months, $480,000 had disappeared into 3 real estate developments. All 3 failed. A strip mall in Pigeon Forge that never leased. A condo project in Sevierville that stalled at foundation. A vacation rental company that existed only on paper. Curtis Walsh was $200,000 in debt. His credit cards were maxed. His real estate license was under review, and Richard Calloway's estate was worth $2.8 million. The math was simple. It was always simple. If I died in a car accident, and if the courts found no foul play, and if Curtis and Denise contested the prenuptial agreement, and if the executor role defaulted to the next of kin, then $2.8 million would split between 2 people who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill for $500,000. Curtis did not hate me. That would have required emotion. Curtis needed me dead the way a man with an overdue mortgage needs a check. I was a line item, a number to be zeroed out. I found one more entry, a wire transfer from Curtis's business account to Troy Beckham, $15,000, 3 days before my brakes were cut. The memo line read, vehicle repair, $15,000. That was the price Curtis put on my life. I count things for a living. I counted every lie. I closed the laptop. I had enough to start. I was not done. I left the hospital on a Thursday, drove home in a rental car with my ribs taped and my shoulder in a sling. The house felt wrong. Not the house itself, the space around it. The neighbors who used to wave did not wave. The mailbox held 3 unsigned notes suggesting I consider moving somewhere with family. Denise had been thorough. The church group believed I had manipulated Richard during his final illness. The garden club heard I had forged changes to the will. By the time I came home, Sevierville had decided I was the villain. Denise called that evening. Her voice was honey and thorns. Maggie, I'm just worried about you, she paused. Daddy would want you to step back. Daddy would want. She said it that way, present tense, as if Richard were watching and had chosen her side. Thank you, Denise. I will think about it. I hung up. I said to Dale, who was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing phone records, Denise knows. She knew Curtis killed Amber, and she is protecting him. Dale nodded. He had already reached the same conclusion. That night, I sat in Richard's study and opened the envelope, the one from the bottom drawer. For Maggie. Open only when needed. I needed. Inside, 2 pages in Richard's handwriting, a list of questions about Amber's death, the name of the insurance company, policy numbers, account numbers, a password to a backup drive where Richard had stored copies of Amber's insurance documents, the autopsy report, and Curtis's financial filings. Richard had built the foundation. He had done it alone, afraid, in the last months of his life, while his heart was failing and his son was smiling at the dinner table. I held the letter against my chest. Then I put it down. I opened the backup drive, and I began to build the case the way I had built every case for 30 years, brick by brick, number by number, until the wall was high enough to hold. Amber Walsh, 29 when she died, early childhood teacher at a preschool in Maryville. She had a wide smile in every photograph, open eyes, the kind of face that trusts too easily. She married Curtis when she was 27. They met at a friend's barbecue. Curtis was charming then, Dale told me. He could be charming when he needed something. They married fast, within 6 months. Amber's family was small. A mother in Florida, a younger sister in college, no one close enough to see the cracks. 2 years in, Amber died on the Appalachian Trail. Charlie's Bunyan, a narrow rock formation high on the ridge. Curtis told the park rangers she slipped. He said the rock was wet. He said he reached for her and missed. The rangers filed it as an accidental fall. The medical examiner signed off. Case closed. Richard obtained a copy of the autopsy through his lawyer. He had underlined one line in red ink. Bilateral bruising on both wrists, possibly consistent with grasping during fall. I stared at that line. Both wrists. If you are falling and you grab a rock, you bruise one wrist. Maybe. If someone grabs your wrists and holds you over a ledge, you bruise both. Dale had found a witness. Karen Ogle, 45, a hiker who was on the same trail that day. She heard screaming before the fall. She saw Curtis standing on the ledge alone afterward. Not panicked, not yelling for help, standing. Karen was afraid of Curtis. She had reason. After Amber's funeral, which Karen did not attend, Curtis sent Karen a thank you card for coming to the service. A message wrapped in a warning. I know who you are. Karen had stayed silent for 5 years. Dale was asking her to speak. I met with Sheriff Boone at the Sevier County Station on a Monday morning. I brought the forensic lab report on the brake lines and a summary of the dash cam footage. I did not bring the financial records. Not yet. A good auditor releases evidence in stages. Boone read the lab report slowly. Cut with a tool, not wear. Consistent with a cable cutter or aviation snips. He set it down. Curtis Walsh is a respected man in this community. Boone rubbed his jaw. I need more than a cut brake line. I need who, and I need proof. I have footage of 2 men entering my garage the night before the crash, I said. Bring it. I will, when the time is right. Boone studied me. He was not a corrupt man. He was a careful one. In a small county where the Walsh name meant something, careful was how you survived. I will open a preliminary investigation, he said, but I need the official forensic analysis from an accredited lab, not a private report. I had already sent samples to an independent forensic laboratory in Nashville through Dale, chain of custody documented, everything by the book. I had spent 30 years building cases that prosecutors could use. I was not going to hand Curtis Walsh a technicality. I thanked Boone and walked to my car. Curtis's silver pickup sat across the street. Engine off, windows up. He was inside, watching the sheriff's station. When he saw me, he smiled. Slow, deliberate. He raised one hand from the steering wheel and twisted Amber's ring. He wanted me to see. He wanted me afraid. I was not afraid. I had stopped being afraid after I counted to 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Curtis moved fast. Within a week, his lawyer filed a petition to suspend my authority as executor of Richard's estate. Grounds: mental incapacity following a traumatic accident. The filing was 17 pages long. Attached were statements from 4 women at First Baptist Church attesting that I had become paranoid and erratic since the crash, that I had accused Curtis of fantastical things. Denise Walsh Pruitt signed an affidavit describing my deteriorating mental state. Troy Beckham gave a statement to Sheriff Boone. I service Mrs. Calloway's vehicle every month. Troy paused. The brake lines were old. I warned her. Troy said this with a straight face. His hands, I imagined, still stained with grease. I opened my service records, 16 maintenance appointments over 4 years, all at Gatlinburg Toyota. Every oil change, tire rotation, and brake inspection documented with date, mileage, and technician name. None of them said Troy Beckham. His shop appeared nowhere. Not once. Curtis was using the system against me. The courts, the church, the small-town machinery of reputation and assumption. He had the money, the name, and the smile. I had something better. I had receipts. He thinks he's smarter than me, I told Dale that evening. We sat in my kitchen with the service records spread across the table. Dale tapped his fingers on his thermos. Most killers think they are the smartest person in the room. Most killers have not been audited by a forensic accountant. I filed my response to the petition the next morning. Attached, the complete service history from Gatlinburg Toyota. A certified letter from their service manager confirming that Troy Beckham had never performed work on my vehicle, and a polite request that the court investigate perjury. The hearing was set for 3 weeks out. Dale found Karen Ogle at a rental cabin outside Townsend, 40 miles from where Amber died. She was a high school biology teacher who spent her weekends hiking the same trails she had hiked for 20 years. She had not gone back to Charlie's Bunyan since the day she heard screaming. Dale called me on a Tuesday. She'll talk, but she wants to hear from you first. I called Karen that evening. Her voice was thin, stretched tight, the voice of a woman who had carried a stone in her chest for 5 years. I heard her scream, Karen said. Then nothing. Then I came around the bend and he was just standing there, looking down over the edge. She swallowed. No shouting, no running for help. He turned and looked at me. What did you see in his face? I asked. Nothing. That is what scared me. I told Karen my story. The brakes, the embankment, the 2 minutes and 14 seconds, the way Curtis sat on the guardrail and waited. Karen was quiet for a long time. I'll give a sworn statement, she said. She told me one more thing. After Amber's funeral, a card arrived at Karen's home. A Hallmark sympathy card. Inside, in neat handwriting, "Thank you for attending Amber's service." Signed, Curtis Walsh. Karen had not attended the funeral. She had never met Curtis before the trail. She had not given her name to anyone that day. Curtis had found her. The card was not a thank you, it was a message. I know who you are. I know where you live. Stay quiet. For 5 years, Karen stayed quiet. Not anymore, she said. I hung up the phone and wrote her name in my file. Karen Ogle. Witness. The wall was getting higher. I built the case the way I had built every forensic audit of my career. Systematic, layered, redundant. Each piece of evidence cross-referenced with at least 2 independent sources. Nothing left to memory, everything documented. The file had 6 sections. 1. Dale's dashcam footage, Curtis Walsh and Troy Beckham entering my garage at 2:14 a.m., April 6th, 37 minutes inside, time-stamped, faces clear. 2. The forensic laboratory report from Nashville. Brake lines cut with a shearing tool. Not corrosion, not fatigue. Human action. 3. The financial trail. $15,000 wired from Curtis's business account to Troy Beckham's personal account. 3 days before the crash. Memo. Vehicle repair. 4. Karen Ogle's sworn affidavit. Curtis Walsh, standing alone at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the place where Amber Walsh fell. No panic. No call for help. 5. Richard's notes. His list of questions. His underlined autopsy passage. His backup copies of Amber's insurance documents. 6. Gatlinburg Toyota's service records. 16 entries. 0 mentions of Troy Beckham. I contacted a criminal attorney, Patricia Earle, 60, former district attorney for Sevier County. She reviewed the file in her office on a Friday afternoon, reading slowly, turning each page with the same deliberate attention she had brought to the bench. "This is enough for a warrant," she said. "I know. I was DA when Amber Walsh died. Patricia removed her glasses. I have waited 5 years for someone to bring me this. Dale made copies. 3 sets, 3 different attorneys. Cloud backup in 2 locations. Curtis could destroy 1 copy. He could not destroy all of them. 6 sections, 3 copies, 1 case. I was ready. The night before the hearing, I sat on the porch of Richard's cabin in the Smokies. Fog moved through the valley below like slow water, filling the hollows between the ridges, erasing the tree line. The same fog I had driven through on the morning Curtis tried to kill me. I took out Richard's pocket watch. Cracked crystal. Hands frozen at 7:23. I held it in my palm and spoke to a man who could not answer. You knew, Richard. You always knew. I turned the watch over. And you did not tell me. I thought about the video message. Richard's shaking hands, the fear in his voice that he had tried to bury under precision and planning. He had carried his suspicion about Curtis alone through the last months of his illness, through the pain and the medications and the slow surrender of his body. He did not tell me because he was afraid I would stay out of love and place myself in danger out of loyalty. He was probably right. I would have stayed. I would have confronted Curtis directly, without evidence, without allies, without a plan. And Curtis would have moved faster. Richard's silence was not a betrayal. It was the last thing he could give me. Time. And Dale. I cried. For the first time since the crash, I cried. Quietly. No sound. Just tears running down my face and into the collar of my coat, while the fog pressed against the porch railing and the mountains disappeared. Dale called at 10. Ready? I have been ready since I counted to 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I closed the watch. I went inside. I slept 4 hours, dreamless, clean. Sevier County Courthouse. 2nd floor. Courtroom B. Oak paneling. Ceiling fans turning slowly. The Tennessee state flag hanging limp beside the bench. A small room for a large reckoning. Curtis arrived in a charcoal suit. New. Expensive. His lawyer was from Knoxville. $300 haircut, monogrammed briefcase. Curtis smiled at the judge. He smiled at the gallery. He smiled at me. The same smile he had given through every lie for years. His lawyer spoke first. Mrs. Calloway was a grieving woman. The accident had left her traumatized. She had developed paranoid ideations. She believed her stepson was trying to harm her. Clearly, she was not fit to manage a $2.8 million estate. Denise took the witness stand. She cried. I counted. 17 seconds of tears, then a pause, then her line. Daddy would want us to protect the family's legacy. She described my erratic behavior with the precision of a woman who had rehearsed in front of a mirror. Troy Beckham testified next. I service her car regularly. Those brake lines were worn. I warned her. He spoke clearly except when the questions got specific. Then he stuttered. A slight catch on the consonants. I had heard that stutter before, in boardrooms, from men whose numbers did not add up. The judge listened. His face gave nothing away. Curtis's lawyer rested the case with a flourish. The gallery, mostly churchwomen Denise had organized, nodded along. Curtis leaned back in his chair, confident, in control. Then Patricia Earle stood, my attorney, 60 years old, gray suit, no jewelry, voice like a closing door. Your Honor, my client does not merely oppose this petition. My client wishes to present evidence of a crime. The courtroom went still. Curtis stopped smiling. Patricia connected a laptop to the courtroom monitor. The dashcam footage played without commentary. Curtis Walsh and Troy Beckham walking up my driveway at 2:14 a.m., opening the garage side door, inside for 37 minutes, leaving, faces lit by the motion sensor light over the garage. The courtroom watched in silence. Patricia presented the forensic laboratory report. Brake lines sheared with a cutting tool. Cross-section analysis consistent with aviation snips or cable cutters. Not corrosion, not age, not accident. She presented the financial records. $15,000 from Curtis Walsh to Troy Beckham, 3 days prior. Vehicle repair. She presented the service records from Gatlinburg, Toyota, 16 entries spanning 4 years. Troy Beckham's name appeared nowhere. Curtis stood up. The color drained from his face like water leaving a glass. His lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him back into his seat. Troy's hands began to shake. I saw it from across the room. His fingers gripped the edge of the gallery bench, and his knuckles turned white. This story is reaching the moment I waited months for. Hit like if you want Maggie to win. I looked at Curtis. For the first time since I had known him, he was not smiling. His mouth was a flat line. His eyes were empty. I spoke, quietly, the way I speak when I am certain. I count things for a living. I counted every lie. Patricia asked the judge to suspend the hearing and refer the matter to the criminal division. The judge agreed. He issued a temporary restraining order against Curtis Walsh. Curtis was ordered not to leave Sevier County pending investigation. Curtis's lawyer asked for a recess. The judge said no. The wall held. Troy Beckham ran. 3 hours after the hearing, he packed a bag and drove south on I-40, heading for the North Carolina border. He made it 47 miles. Dale had called the state police that morning before the hearing began. He knew Troy. He knew the type. Men who do the hands-on work are always the first to bolt when the paperwork catches up. Tennessee Highway Patrol pulled Troy over outside Newport. He was doing 93 in a 65 zone. His hands were shaking so badly he could not turn off the engine. They found a duffel bag in the back seat with $8,000 in cash and a one-way bus ticket to Atlanta. In the interrogation room at the Sevier County station, Troy lasted 40 minutes. Curtis paid me $15,000. Troy's stutter consumed his consonants. He said it would look like an accident. Just cut the lines. That's all. Just cut the lines. The words sat in the transcript like a coffin nail. Troy gave them more. Curtis had also asked Troy to inspect Amber Walsh's climbing rope 5 years ago. Troy had used sandpaper to weaken the fibers at 3 stress points. Curtis told Troy it was to test the gear. Troy said he did not know what Curtis planned to do. Troy was lying about not knowing, but Troy was telling the truth about everything else. Then Troy said the thing that closed the last door on Denise Walsh Pruitt. After the car went off the road, Curtis called Denise. I was in his truck, speakerphone. Denise picked up on the second ring. She said, "Is it done?" "Is it done?" 3 words. 3 words that turned a church-going sister into a conspirator. Sheriff Boone looked through the one-way glass at Troy Beckham's trembling hands and picked up his phone. The Amber Walsh case was reopened on a Thursday, 5 years and 3 months after her death. Troy's confession, Karen Ogle's sworn statement, the re-examination of the climbing rope pulled from evidence storage, which showed abrasion patterns inconsistent with natural wear, manufactured, applied with a coarse grit tool at calculated intervals along the load-bearing sections. The medical examiner revisited the autopsy. Bilateral wrist bruising, both wrists gripped, held. Not a woman grabbing at rock. A woman being held over a ledge by someone stronger. Amber Walsh did not slip. Amber Walsh was pushed. The arrest warrant was issued on a Friday morning. Sheriff Boone and 4 deputies arrived at Curtis Walsh's home at 6:45 a.m. Curtis answered the door in a bathrobe, coffee in hand, as if he had been expecting company for breakfast. He did not resist. He did not speak. The deputies cuffed him and read him his rights in the driveway while the morning light turned his silver pickup truck the color of old tin. I stood across the street. Dale stood beside me. Curtis looked at me through the squad car window. I stepped closer, close enough that he could hear me through the glass. Your father knew. He always knew. Curtis's face did not change, but his hand moved to his right ring finger, Amber's ring. The deputies had taken it during booking. His finger was bare. He twisted at nothing. Denise was arrested at First Baptist Church, mid-service. The irony was heavy enough to bend light. She cried as they led her out. The congregation watched in silence. Curtis Walsh, attempted first-degree murder, second-degree murder, Denise Walsh Pruitt, conspiracy, accessory after the fact. The names sounded clean when spoken by a clerk. The crimes behind them were not. Denise performed beautifully at first. In the interrogation room, she wept. She trembled. She said, "I didn't know anything. Curtis never told me. I'm a mother. I go to church." Sheriff Boone set the phone records on the table. 14 minutes after my car went off the embankment, Denise Walsh Pruitt called Curtis Walsh. Duration, 3 minutes. 2 minutes after that call ended, Denise called Troy Beckham. Duration, 1 minute. "Is it done?" Boone read from Troy's transcript. Denise's crying paused. She blinked. The switch was almost visible. The moment the performance failed and the real person underneath had to decide what to do next, she changed tactics. Her voice hardened. "Maggie manipulated our father. She took everything from us. She deserved—" She stopped. She heard herself. The room heard her. I was watching through the one-way glass. I said nothing. Dale stood beside me with his arms crossed, his thermos on the table, his face as still as granite. "I didn't mean that," Denise whispered. But she had. Denise broke completely 20 minutes later. She told them Curtis had confided in her after Amber's death. He said Amber had threatened to divorce him, take his assets, expose his debts. He said he handled it. Denise knew what that meant. She had known for 5 years and said nothing. "I chose my brother," Denise said. Real tears now, not the practiced kind. The kind that come when you finally see the shape of what you have done and cannot unsee it. "I chose wrong." Yes, she did. I watched through the glass. I did not gloat. I did not feel victory. I felt the weight of a family that Richard had loved, that Richard had built, collapsing into rubble while the woman who counted things stood on the outside and watched. Curtis's attorney offered a plea deal the following week. Curtis would plead guilty to attempted murder in my case. In exchange, the prosecution would not pursue charges in Amber's death. The evidence in the older case was thinner, circumstantial. A jury might not convict. Patricia Earle laid it out for me at her office. The plea means Curtis serves 20 years, guaranteed. If we go to trial on both charges, we might win everything, or we might lose the Amber case. I looked at the photograph on Patricia's desk, a framed snapshot of the Smoky Mountains at sunrise, the kind you buy at a gas station. I looked at Richard's pocket watch in my hand, 7:23. I thought about Amber Walsh, 29 years old, a teacher, a woman with a wide smile and trusting eyes who married a man she believed loved her and died on a cliff with his hands around her wrists. Amber had no one to speak for her. Her mother was in Florida. Her sister was young. The park rangers closed the file. The medical examiner signed off. 5 years of silence. "Amber deserves a trial," I said. 20 years is a long time, Mrs. Calloway. Amber is dead forever." Patricia removed her glasses. She set them on the desk. She smiled. The first genuine smile I had seen from her. "I was hoping you would say that. I have been waiting 5 years for this case." "Prosecute both," I said. Patricia picked up her phone. Before the trial, I drove to the Appalachian Trail, to Charlie's Bunyan, to the place where Amber Walsh fell. The trail climbed through rhododendron and spruce. The air thinned. Fog moved across the ridge like a living thing, filling the gaps between the rocks, curling over the ledge where Amber had stood for the last time. I brought wildflowers from the cabin, purple asters and goldenrod. I laid them at the edge. No one had left flowers here in 5 years. The mountain remembered. People forgot. I stood at the ledge and looked down. The drop was steep, the rocks sharp, the laurel thick at the bottom. Amber fell 80 feet. She was alive when she hit the first outcropping. She was not alive when she reached the bottom. I took out the pocket watch. 7:23. I held it over the valley and let the fog curl around my hand. "Richard, I will speak for her, I promise. The mountains don't forget." I put the flowers down. I closed the watch. I walked back to the car. The trial started in 6 days. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I will not recount every day. Some things do not need repetition to carry weight. The key moments were these. Day 4. Dale's dashcam footage was played for the jury. The courtroom went silent. 12 jurors watched Curtis Walsh and Troy Beckham walk into my garage at 2:14 a.m. and emerge 37 minutes later. One juror, a woman in her 50s, pressed her hand to her mouth. She did not remove it for the rest of the session. Day 9. Karen Ogle took the stand. She described Curtis on the cliff, standing, looking down. No panic, no grief, no call for help. "He turned and looked at me," Karen said. "His face was blank, like a man checking the weather." Day 14. The forensic expert confirmed 2 findings. The brake lines on my car were severed with a cutting tool. The rope abrasions on Amber Walsh's climbing equipment were manufactured with a coarse grit abrasive applied at weight-bearing intervals. Day 17. Curtis Walsh took the stand against his lawyer's advice. He wept. He spoke of loving Amber. He spoke of respecting his stepmother. He twisted the air where Amber's ring had been. Patricia Earle stood for cross-examination. She asked one question. "Mr. Walsh, why do you still wear the wedding ring of the wife you murdered?" Curtis erupted. He stood. He screamed, "I did not kill her!" The courtroom rang with his voice. The judge gavelled. The bailiff stepped forward. Curtis's lawyer pulled him into his seat. I sat still. In 30 years of forensic work, I had learned one thing about truth and lies. People who tell the truth do not need to shout. Curtis shouted. I counted. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. I sat in the hallway on a wooden bench with my hands folded in my lap. Dale sat 3 seats away, his thermos between his boots, his eyes on the courtroom door. Patricia paced. She was the only one who moved. At 4:17 p.m., the bailiff opened the door. "We have a verdict." The courtroom filled. Curtis sat at the defense table in the same charcoal suit he had worn the first day, though it hung looser now. 3 weeks of trial had carved the confidence out of him. His lawyer whispered something. Curtis did not respond. The 4 persons stood. A man in his 60s, retired, steady hands. On the charge of attempted first-degree murder of Margaret Calloway. Guilty. I did not move. On the charge of second-degree murder of Amber Walsh. Guilty. The courtroom exhaled. Someone in the gallery made a small, choked sound. I did not turn to look. Troy Beckham, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and criminal tampering with a vehicle. Sentencing, 15 years. Denise Walsh Pruitt, guilty of conspiracy and accessory after the fact. Sentencing, 8 years. Curtis Walsh, life without parole. The judge read the sentences in a flat, measured voice. The words fell like stones into still water. Curtis was led from the courtroom in handcuffs. At the door, he turned and looked at me one last time. There was no anger in his face, no hatred, no defiance, nothing. The emptiness I saw was the truest thing Curtis Walsh had ever shown me. Behind the smiles, behind the charm, behind the careful calculations, there had never been anything at all. 3 verdicts, 3 sentences, 1 family destroyed. I was not happy. I was finished. I walked out of the courthouse into late afternoon light. Television cameras lined the steps, microphones extended toward my face like the necks of birds. I did not stop. I did not speak. I nodded once at Dale, who was leaning against his truck in the parking lot, and walked to the passenger side. Dale drove me home. Neither of us spoke for 37 miles. The Smokies passed in the windows, green and blue and gray, the same mountains that had witnessed everything and said nothing. At the house, I sat in Richard's chair. The leather was worn where his arms had rested. The cushion still held the shape of a man who would never sit there again. I opened the pocket watch. 7:23. "It's over, Richard." The room was quiet. The clock on the mantel ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Normal sounds. The sounds of a house where no one is planning to kill anyone. Karen Ogle called that evening. Her voice was different, lighter. The stone she had carried for 5 years was gone. "Thank you, Mrs. Calloway, for Amber." 2 words, for Amber. They were enough. I hung up the phone. I walked through the house, room by room, the way a forensic accountant walks through a completed audit. Checking, verifying, making sure nothing was missed. Everything was in order, every number balanced, every lie accounted for. I turned off the lights. I went to bed. And for the first time in months, I did not count anything before I fell asleep. With my authority as executor restored, I settled Richard's estate the way he would have wanted, carefully, fairly, without malice. I established the Amber Walsh Memorial Scholarship for early childhood educators in the Appalachian region. The funding came from the portion of the estate that would have gone to Curtis, $10,000 a year to a teacher who reminded someone of a young woman with a wide smile who never got to grow old. 29 years old. She deserved to be remembered by her name, not by how she died. I kept the cabin in the Smokies. I sold the big house in Sevierville. I kept Richard's books and his fishing flies and the chair that still held his shape. One Tuesday, I went to a new mechanic for an oil change. A young woman at the shop walked me through the service checklist. When she finished, I smelled brake fluid in the bay. Clean, sharp, industrial. "That smell normal?" I asked. She looked at me strangely. "Yes, ma'am. Brake fluid always smells like that. Means the system is full." "I know," I said. "I know the difference now." A letter arrived from the State Women's Correctional Facility. Not from Curtis. Curtis never wrote. It came from Denise. One line on lined paper in handwriting that trembled. "I'm sorry about Amber." I read it twice. I folded it. I placed it in the case file between the phone records and the arrest report where it belonged. Then I closed the file. Some apologies arrived too late to forgive, but not too late to record. I met Dale Hensley for the last time at a diner outside Pigeon Forge. Red vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like it had been brewed at dawn and forgotten. Dale sat across from me with his thermos on the table and his hands around a mug he was not drinking from. 14 months you followed Curtis, I said. You watched him. You waited. Did you ever want to quit? Dale tapped his fingers on the table. 1, 2, 3, his thinking rhythm. Your husband paid me to protect you. He paid 2 years in advance. Dale paused. But after I met you, Mrs. Calloway, I would have done it for free. I reached into my coat pocket and set Richard's pocket watch on the table between us. The cracked crystal, the frozen hands, 7:23. You kept your promise to him, I said. This belongs to you now. Dale looked at the watch for a long time. He picked it up, turned it over, ran his thumb across the back the way I used to. I'll get it running again, he said. I know you will. Dale reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table, cream-colored. Richard's handwriting on the front. For Maggie. Richard gave me this with the USB, told me not to deliver it until everything was finished. Dale pushed it across the table. Everything is finished. I took the envelope. I did not open it there. Some things are meant to be read alone. Dale Hensley, a stranger on a road. The man who saved my life with 2 words. I gave him the watch of the man who sent him. It seemed right. I opened Richard's letter at the cabin, alone. The fire was low, and the windows held nothing but fog and the shapes of mountains in the dark. His handwriting was steady. He had written this on a good day, when the medication was working and his hands were still his own. Maggie, if you are reading this, then Dale has done his job and you are safe. I owe you an apology that I cannot deliver in person, so I will leave it here. I did not tell you about Curtis because I was afraid. Not afraid of Curtis. Afraid of you. Afraid that if I told you, you would stay beside me out of love and put yourself between me and the danger. You would have. I know you. You would have stood in front of a train if you thought it would save me. So I stayed silent. I hired Dale. I built the file. I did what I could from inside a body that was failing, and I prayed that I was wrong about my son. I was not wrong. You are the finest thing that happened to my life. The pocket watch stopped at 3:47, the minute I left you. But my love did not stop. It does not have hands or a crystal to break. Count the good things, Maggie. Not just the lies. Count the mornings. Count the fog on the mountains. Count the years we had. I love you, Richard. I folded the letter. I held it against my chest. The fire crackled. The fog pressed against the windows, and I began to count the good things, the way Richard asked me to. 1 year passed. I moved to the cabin full time, sold the Sevierville house to a young couple with twin daughters who filled the yard with bicycles and noise. Richard would have liked the noise. Mornings at the cabin follow a pattern. Coffee on the porch at 6, fog in the valley, thick and white, burning off by 8. The mountains reveal themselves in stages. First the near ridges, then the middle distances, then the far blue peaks that run all the way to North Carolina. I teach a forensic accounting course at the community college in Sevierville. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 12 students, mostly women, mostly older, mostly starting over. I teach them what the numbers hide and how to find it. The Amber Walsh Scholarship awarded its first 3 grants in September. 3 early childhood teachers in Appalachian schools. One of them wrote me a letter. She said she had never heard of Amber before the scholarship, but now she thinks about her every time she walks into her classroom. That is enough. Dale sent me a photograph in March. Richard's pocket watch, face up on the dashboard of his truck. The hands read 8:15 a.m., running, keeping time. In April, my phone rang, a woman's voice, young, uncertain. "Mrs. Calloway? My name is Jessie. I'm Amber's sister. I wanted to thank you for the scholarship." I sat down on the porch. I said, "Tell me everything." She did. A letter arrived from a law firm in Nashville. Curtis Walsh was appealing his conviction. His new attorney requested that I withdraw my complaint regarding Amber's death. The letter cited insufficient evidence and emotional bias and suggested that continued prosecution was detrimental to all parties. I read it once. I set it on the kitchen table. I poured a cup of coffee. I sat with it. 12 pages of legal argument, footnotes, case citations, a carefully worded paragraph implying that a 69-year-old woman might prefer peace to prolonged litigation. I took a sheet of paper from the drawer. I wrote 2 words, number M. Calloway. I sealed the envelope. I stamped it. I placed it in the mailbox and raised the flag. Some things do not require explanation. A boundary is a boundary. It does not need a footnote. I walked back inside. I washed my coffee cup. I opened my notebook and wrote the date, the sender, the subject, and the disposition. Then I closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf next to Richard's books. Done, filed, closed. Outside the window, the Smokies were sharp in the morning light. No fog today. Every ridge visible, every tree distinct, the whole range laid out like an open ledger. Now I count different things. Sunrises, cups of coffee shared with students, letters from Jessie about her sister, phone calls from Karen who hikes again, postcards from Dale, unsigned, showing mountains. I count the good things, the way Richard asked me to, and I do not count backward anymore. Dawn on the Smokies. The sky turned copper, then honey, then a pale gold that spread across the ridgeline like something spilled from a jar. Fog pooled in the valleys below the cabin, still and white, holding the last of the night. I stood on the porch with my hands around a warm mug and watched the mountains appear. My name is Margaret Calloway, orphan at 16, forensic accountant for 30 years, widow, survivor. And now, a woman telling her story. This story was never about revenge. Revenge is loud and wasteful and belongs to people who have not learned to count. This story is about the truth Richard wanted me to find, the truth Amber deserved to have spoken. If you are listening to this and you are in a place where someone wants you silent, do not stay silent. Count the evidence. Find someone you trust and speak. I learned something on a road in the Smokies, pinned in a wrecked car, bleeding, with my stepson watching from above. I learned that the people who want you dead count on your fear. They count on your silence. They count on the fog. But fog lifts. It always lifts. And what is underneath? The rock, the ridge, the hard truth of the mountain that remains. The mountains don't forget, and neither do I. If Maggie's story reached you, subscribe and share it with a strong woman you know. I will see you at the next story. I set down my coffee. The sun cleared the ridge. The fog began to pull apart, revealing the valley below, green, deep, alive. I counted. 1 sunrise, 1 morning, 1 beginning. Enough.